So while we're still in the heat of October, I wanted to ask you guys a question. Is the Thorn Trilogy the best trilogy in the Halloween franchise? What's up, everybody? Nick from the Lost River Drive-In here, and tonight I wanted to discuss the Thorn Trilogy, as fans know it to be. But that's really Halloween 4, Halloween 5, and Halloween 6. You could also obviously include the first two movies into that, because technically that's in continuity. But really just the Thorn Trilogy specifically. I wanted to ask you guys if you think this is the greatest trilogy in the Halloween franchise. Now, the reason I think about this is because obviously with the recent David Gordon Green trilogy, a lot of people were really kind of miffed about that one. I think everybody had a movie in that trilogy that they ended up really liking, and for good reason, but I think most people agreed that they didn't think the trilogy as a whole really flowed all that well together. Too many things were mentioned and then never talked about again, simply just forgotten, story threads, plot points, characters that were totally underutilized and underserved. All of that's very true. And really, most importantly, a huge change in tone, stylistically, from movie to movie. So, Halloween, the Thorn Trilogy, this is what everybody comes back to. Everybody always comes back to Thorn. And why is that? Well, one, Halloween 4 is a fan favorite. I mean, far be it from me to not acknowledge that. That's obviously one of the ones that most fans really have a soft spot for. Halloween 5 in recent years has really gotten reevaluations from people, and people are like, you know what, that movie's actually pretty solid. I'm in the minority that thinks it's better than 4. I don't know if I'd say better technically, but I prefer it. And then Halloween the Curse of Michael Myers, which really has a cult following. There's a large number of people that would say Halloween 6 is their favorite of this trilogy. But we always go back to the Thorn Trilogy. When people are talking about where Halloween should go next, what do they keep mentioning? Danielle Harris, revisit Thorn, make a sequel to 4, make a sequel to 5, make a sequel to 6, dig more into Thorn. All of these things. People always come back to the Thorn Trilogy. And I think there's a reason for that. Narratively, tonally, story structure, character arcs, character journeys, whatever you want to call it, they're all the most solid in the Thorn Trilogy. I really do think so. Let's kind of break this down a little bit. We see Jamie Lloyd as this orphaned daughter of Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie Strode. She has an adoptive family. We see her trying to integrate into that family, the boogeyman coming for her, how that affects her, how the evil is almost kind of passed on to her in a way. And then she gets out of it. He comes back. It's this continual cat and mouse of Jamie Lloyd escapes, Michael returns, Jamie Lloyd escapes, until she doesn't escape anymore. The bloodline has been continued because of her baby, and that baby is supposed to be the final sacrifice, and this whole thing has been building to the cult of Thorn resurfacing and saying what their entire purpose was and Michael's entire purpose is, and it's basically a curse passed down from generations. Now, whether you like that explanation or not, that's not really the point. The point is, these three movies, their narrative focus is Jamie Lloyd. Now, obviously, she dies in the first act of Halloween 6, or if it's the producer's cut, in the second act of Halloween 6. So can you really say it's still her story? Yes, because her story and Michael's stories are intertwined, and her baby is what Michael is after to kind of end his story, end his curse. So it's all about Jamie Lloyd. Now, you have other things that are very consistent throughout these three movies. You have a more angry Michael Myers, a more resourceful Michael Myers, a more playful Michael Myers in ways. You have obviously the same locations. Salt Lake City, Utah for all three movies was a brilliant idea because it really does feel like these movies were shot in the same place because they were. Things look the same. You have returning locations, returning characters. Narratively, that helps these movies. And as an audience member, as you're watching that, it really helps you identify a place and time for these three movies. And I think that's another reason why this trilogy, for so many people, just feels so special and feels like the trilogy to go back to and to talk about, because it really does feel like a more cohesive trilogy. Now, cohesion, we could say that's, up to the interpreter of whether they think it is cohesive or not. But I just mean in the sense of Jamie Lloyd's arc, the setting, the type of Michael you're getting, his goal, his ultimate end game. Now, obviously, you do get to the cult and all that kind of stuff. So some of you probably heard me say cohesive and you were like, what? But I do think it makes sense. It may not have been the way a lot of us would have gone, but I do think it makes sense. But I think that all three movies feel very married to each other. They feel like sequels to one another. I don't think you can really say that about many of the movies in this series. Halloween and Halloween 2 are a great double bill. Absolutely. Halloween H2O, in moments, especially the third act of the movie, is a great follow-up to those two movies. In other moments, it completely loses the focus of what those first two movies were about and is focusing on characters that really aren't important at all. It's a different setting. It doesn't feel the same. It doesn't look the same. So at times, while H2O does nail it, there are other times where H2O just completely drops the ball on continuing those two movies and making a solid trilogy. And then we're not even going to talk about Resurrection, okay? Rob Zombie's two movies, it's just two movies. I think they're very cohesive and they work really well together, but there's only two movies. We're talking about a trilogy here. Now, some might say, well, hey, David Gordon Green's trilogy also kept some certain characters and locations. Yeah, absolutely, but I think it's tonally. I think that's what it is for me that separates the Thorn trilogy and David Gordon Green's trilogy. It's the tone. I'm not sitting here saying that I think 4, 5, and 6 are better movies. No, not necessarily. 6 and Kills for me are like neck and neck in my franchise ranking. They really are. Ends and Halloween 5 are really high for me. And 4 is a little behind middle of the road, while H18 is near the bottom for me. So I guess it's actually really not that far off, but it's the three movies together. How do they feel together? And I think that the Thorn trilogy absolutely feels more like a cohesive trilogy. And that's just kind of a long way of saying that. But I just think that the Thorn trilogy got the things right that you need to get right. They got Michael right. They got the setting right. They got a lot of the actors right and the characters the way they're written. Now, again, don't say shit about Tina. I don't want to hear it. But I'm just saying, when it comes to Jamie Lloyd, when it comes to Rachel Carruthers, when it comes to Dr. Loomis is a massive presence in these three movies. And you really see his progression too. From, dear God, this is happening again, to, I'm not letting this happen again. I don't care if I have to use a child as bait, to, I don't care if I have one foot in the grave. I will find some energy and some stamina, and I will do whatever I can to stop this man. And I think that all of that works really well. I do think that the focus on the Strodes in Halloween 6 was definitely a little more fan servicey of like, let's throw another Strode family in there and have them live in the Myers house. Is it necessary? No, it's not necessary. You didn't need it. You really could have just focused on Tommy Doyle. But to that point, I would say this movie is more about Jamie's ultimate, arc and her character's finality and her story's finality, as well as Tommy Doyle and really Haddonfield. I don't know if this is really about Kara Strode. I've never felt that way. So I think at the end of the day, like, it's a long way of me trying to say, yeah, I think the Thorn trilogy is the best trilogy in the series. I really do. Simply, it doesn't have the best movies. But I think as a trilogy, it works the best. You see these things continue on from movie to movie. These characters continue on from movie to movie. Not a lot of plot points are left. I mean, you may hate how they answered the Man in Black in Halloween 6, but they answered it. It wasn't left hanging. You may hate what they did to Rachel in the beginning of Halloween 5, but she was back. There was resolution there. We could go down the line for these things. Everything is tied up pretty well. They take care of most plot points, most character arcs. They just look and feel the same in a lot of ways. And I think for that reason, yeah, the Thorn trilogy is the strongest trilogy in the Halloween franchise. But I want to know what you guys think, because I know some of you are going to disagree with me. I know some of you may have not even ever thought of this. You may have never sat down and gone, what's the strongest trilogy? And maybe now you are. And if that's the case, I'm glad to help. But I want to hear from you guys. What do you think is the strongest trilogy, narratively speaking? 3 movies back to back to back in this series. Is it the Thorn Trilogy or is it something else? Comment down below. Let me know what you think. Like this video if you haven't already. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Follow me on social media and patreon.com. All of my links are down below in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, this is Nick at the Lost River Drive-In, and I am pulling out.